Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Janet Love Show, where the world of intuition is explored through empowerment in health, relationships, and spirituality. Tune up your intuitive awareness with divine insights from Janet Love. Come through the door of discovery where your own intuitive power is revealed. Call the show at 646-478-3089 or join the chat now as Janet welcomes your questions and comments in this show's topic.
Well, welcome everyone. This is Janet Love, and you are here at our new time here in the new year. And I welcome everyone that is showing up today, or those who find us in podcasts. You know that my shows are always, the focus is on empowerment, awakening, and delving into what really is going on in the world today. A new consciousness is emerging. The energies have been here for a while, and we are really being pricked from within to become aware of really what the world is really like. And a lot of the systems of the past just don't work anymore. And this isn't news to many people who are in this field or genre, but there are many people who are still waking up. And my guest today is a gentleman who did that, who woke up, who had an extraordinary experience, and who took a risk and decided that he was going to tell the world what really came to him as a gift. And my guest is Garnet Schulhauser, and he has written 2 books. The third one is coming. The topic is Dancing on a Stamp, a perspective of seeing the whole. And the second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit, astonishing insights from heaven. And having read the books, I can tell you that for many people, these are revelations. And for those people who are more aware and enlightened, there's still great content, great information here that, again, expands on this ever-increasing movement that is happening in the world today. So welcome to the show. I'm going to bring him on air. Garnet, welcome to the Janet Love Show. So pleased to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Janet. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to be on your show.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you're a pro. I know you've been on a lot of shows and have done a lot of media, so this isn't new for you. But let's tell, because besides this show, you have other radio shows and your books. Tell people right up front, how they can get to your website and see all the other places that you've been and how to get your books and anything else you'd like to share. Go ahead and let people know that now.
Well, my website is garnetschulhauser.com, Janet, and that's hard for people to remember. So if they Google Dancing on a Stamp, they can get to my website. And on my website, I have information about my books. You can download a free excerpt. You can dial into my social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google+. And there's also a book video for my first 2 books there that they can tap into. I have information about all my upcoming events, like my radio shows. I'm going to be speaking at the Ozark Mountain Transformation Conference April 5 to 7 in Arkansas this year. And I also have a number of other radio shows lined up, and they can also listen to all my previous radio shows. This one is number 76 for me, Janet. And so,
I know you've done a lot, yeah. That's why I mentioned it, because you've done so much, and this is only one show, and for people who who are really interested, they want to hear more about this, they can certainly go there, and you do. You have a wealth of information, which is wonderful. And I know about Ozark. Let's real quickly, let me spell your name, because that's always good on radio to do. It's Garnet, Garnet for listeners, and the last name is Schulhauser, and that is a mouthful. So he's right. Just Google Dancing on a Stamp if you're struggling, and it's super simple. You'll find it. It's an easy website. Once you get there and see it, it's easy. And I'm very familiar with Ozark. I know the woman who I met her, actually. She's passed away now. But tell me, I'm interested. How did you decide to go with Ozark? Was it just the right fit for them to publish your book? And tell us, give listeners, I know what it is. Tell listeners who created Ozark Mountain Publishing.
Well, Ozark was founded by Dolores Cannon, as you know, Janet, and she was a wonderful lady, great inspiration, a great sort of purveyor of the messages from Spirit. She worked tirelessly, had a abounding energy, and she unfortunately passed away in October of 2014. But I know that she's still working from beyond the veil to help her company continue her legacy. It's being run now by her daughters Julia and Nancy and various other staff, and so they're carrying on. How I found Ozark initially was that when I finished the manuscript for my first book, I was searching for someone who liked to publish in the spiritual metaphysical genre, and Ozark was one of them who came up on the list, and I sent them a submission, and thankfully they agreed to offer me a publishing contract, and so the rest is history. They published their first book, my second book. They're in the process of publishing my third book, and if I write another one, which I'm in the process of, I hope they'll publish that one as well. So it's been a very great working relationship.
Well, that's wonderful. And they really are a perfect fit for you. I mean, there's lots of publishers that when I saw Ozark, I thought the same, that it's a great fit. And for anybody who's not familiar with Dolores Cannon's work, I encourage you to look her up. She was a hypnotherapist, is how she began. And but she's the most unassuming woman. She looks like somebody's grandmother, or looked like someone's grandmother, and yet she did extraordinarily advanced spiritual work, especially through her hypnosis. That she met people and helped people that were having these really unusual experiences. And so for anybody that's interested, she's another great find. And she developed Ozark Mountain Publishing. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I think, again, she was ahead of her time. She was definitely a pioneer. So as are you, and let's kind of dive in. I think, again, for people who are new and that haven't heard you before, to hear that you were a corporate lawyer, you were what we call upper class. You certainly, had a more than comfortable life. Everything in your life looked good or seemed good. There's really no reason for you to sort of dive into anything that might seem in that world as kind of maybe new agey or kind of off, I'm sure to some people. You talk about that in your introduction. Tell listeners a little bit about that story and about how you met Albert and who Albert is, for those who haven't read the books or aren't familiar. And let's kind of begin with the beginning, where it began for you and how Dancing in the Stamp came into reality.
Well, to go way back, I was just to let your listeners know, I was born and raised as a Roman Catholic in a very religious family, and then as I grew older into my late teens, I began to doubt a lot of the beliefs and dogmas of that church. So I was casting about for a new paradigm to latch onto, and I constantly asked myself the questions that every adult asks themselves at one point or another, like who am I, why am I here, what's my life purpose, and what happens to me when I die. And so I was really searching for answers to those questions. In the meantime, I was practicing corporate law. And so it happened one day, I was still practicing law back in 2007, and I was taking a stroll down the street when suddenly, out of the blue, a homeless man just jumps out in front of me. And he looked like a typical homeless man with stringy, greasy hair and a scraggly beard and dirty, slept-in clothes. The reason I didn't sort of go around him like I usually did with other people I encountered like that on the street was because he had these amazing, dazzling, sparkling blue eyes. And I felt like his gaze was penetrating into the depths of my soul, and I sensed that he knew everything about me, everything I'd ever said or done in my life, which was strange because we had never met before. And at the same time, his eyes were sending me this wave of pure, unconditional love that was infusing my whole body with an amazing sense of peace and security and well-being. It was a feeling I've never experienced before. I was basking in his gaze, and I was like a deer caught in the headlights, Janet, and I could have stayed there forever. I don't know how long I stood there, just enjoying the feeling I was getting from this man. And then he broke the spell by saying to me, "Why are you here?" And then he quickly disappeared into a nearby store. And then after a few minutes, I collected my wits, and I decided, I better go find him. So I went into the store he had gone into, couldn't find him anywhere. He was nowhere to be seen. I walked back out onto the street, and I walked up and down trying to find this man, but he'd seemingly disappeared into thin air. So my curiosity was greatly aroused, as you can imagine, and I decided that night I had to go back the next day to find him, if I could. So I went back to the same street, same time the next day, and I walked up and down. I couldn't see him until suddenly I spotted him sitting all alone on a bench. So I walked up to him and I said, "Who are you and why did you stop me the other day?" And he said, "I'm a soul just like you. I'm here to answer your questions and help you on your journey." And so, unfortunately, then my skeptical lawyer brain kicked in. And I said to him, why do you think you can help me when you can't even help yourself? Because you look like you've been sleeping on the street for weeks and you smell like a dead fish. And he just gave me a big smile. He said, looks can be deceiving because you look like you're a very successful lawyer with everything under control, but we both know that's just a facade. He said, you can turn around if you want, go back to your office, and see if you can find the answers you've been searching for in all those emails waiting for you on your computer, or you can sit down and have a chat with me. So fortunately, my intuition told me that I had nothing to lose by chatting with this man. I sat down on the bench, and that began a dialogue that I had with him that went off and on for the next several months. And I found out that his name was Albert, and he was really one of my spirit guides in disguise. And he had come to answer my questions, and also not just to satisfy my curiosity, but he soon asked me to write a book about his revelations so that they would be available to everyone. So that caught me off guard. I'd never dreamed of writing a book before, Janet, and so I dug in my heels initially, but he was a very gently persuasive soul who eventually convinced me that I should write the manuscript for my first book, Dancing on a Stamp, and so I did. And so that was the beginning of a relationship that has been going on ever since.
Well, for in all fairness, this would not be an easy thing because especially the way our culture is built, it's interesting to me that he chose that form. Maybe it was a matter of a test to see if you would respond. If another man in a three-piece suit had walked up to you, a colleague-looking kind of fellow, and said, hi, I'm your, did the same thing, and you had that same kind of powerful, loving, energetic response, and he said, I'm here to be your, to help you, would it have been easier for you? Did he ever share with you why he chose the form he chose?
No, he didn't. And for sure, it would have been easier if somebody in a three-piece suit had come up to me. So I was, in a way, he didn't ever say this to me, but I knew I was being tested. And the test was, can I sort of get around my prejudices about homeless people and people who live on the street, and sort of start a dialogue with this guy instead of sort of just quickly running around and disappearing. So it was a test for me. And to be frank, ever since then, I've looked at homeless people much differently, Janet. And so that is why that is why he showed up. The interesting thing was that he told me later I was the only one who could see him as a homeless man. So if anybody else had passed by the street that day, they would have seen me sitting on the bench all by myself. So I was the only one who could see him. I did touch him. I felt him. He was very physical, very real to me. And after the first 3 visits, he no longer showed up in physical form. So he just started talking to me as a voice in my head, and we communicated by telepathy. And when I asked him, why did you show up initially as a homeless man, he said it was his way of introducing me to the conversation, because had he just started talking to me out of the blue as a voice in my head, I probably would have thought I was losing my mind. And he's very right. I probably would have. So this way, once he started talking to me by telepathy, I recognized his voice, I knew who he was, and I was very comfortable with the conversation.
Right. No, that makes sense to me, because that would make, unless it happened as a child and you gradually grew into it, especially in our culture where anybody who hears voices is considered crazy. But a lot of people today, spiritually speaking, do hear guides, or some of them called channels. But you're not really a channel. You are really, as he calls himself, a spirit guide. He's got a different role in your life. And that's, again, what I found fascinating about your books, and just the information that's in your books, especially, and I don't want to jump around. We should really stick with Dancing on a Stamp. But as you go into Dancing Forever with Spirit, you're getting into, the animals such as whales and dolphins, and, where they came from and where they were seeded, and the messages that you were to bring back. And again, fascinating that, I know what a lot of people think too, that you had a burning desire. You had been raised Roman or Catholic. It didn't resonate with you as you got older, but there had always been something in you, wasn't it? That burning desire to answer life's bigger questions. You talk about that in the book. So to me, that was sort of like maybe a setup might be the right word, or a mark to see if you would be one of the people to bring that message. As I said in my intro to the show, we have been in this period for a while. We are absolutely to wake up on this planet at some level. And waking up, of course, is just the first level. But it's in mass. The movement is definitely already underway, and you're not the only one. There are many people out there who are, we'll call you ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things because we are part of the whole. We are part of the one, which is really your subtitle, a perspective of seeing the whole. Tell us how, from the point that you moved into this relationship, and he went from physical form, or at least to you, you could see him physically, to the telepathic form. Tell us about maybe that first adventure where you began to have astral projections, I'm assuming, and you moved deeper into this role, let's say, that he tested you, you came through with flying colors. And then I want to ask you how you explained this to your wife and family, when you finally knew you were going to have to come out in the open. But where did it pick up after those first few meetings?
Well, it was when Albert first told me that he wanted me to write a book, and so then it became apparent to me that I had to make a decision. Was I going to come out of the spiritual closet or not? And I didn't tell my wife or my sons about my encounter with Albert, just for fear of what they might think, not for the longest time. And then once Albert prevailed on me to start writing my book, I knew I had to come clean, so I sort of let it out bit by bit to my wife. First of all, that I was writing a book, and then I said I was writing a book about meeting a homeless man, and then finally I said, but the homeless man is really a spirit guide in disguise. And she was very good, and she totally signed on to it. She's very spiritual herself. She's had a couple of spiritual encounters in her life in the past, meeting her deceased mother and father, and so she's very much in tune with what I was saying, and so she was very encouraging, and my sons were the same way. But that was the first stage. I knew that most of my law colleagues and former clients would look at me very strangely if I decided to come out and write about what I told in my first book, Dancing on a Stamp. So I struggled for a long time, even after I wrote my manuscript, about whether I should throw it in the drawer, never to be seen again, or seek a publisher. And then finally I decided, this is something I had to do. And so I then got Ozark Mountain to publish my first book. And, I knew I would lose some friends along the way, but I gained many more new friends. And I was encouraged by so many comments I got from people who said, we like the fact that you had the courage to come out of the closet, the spiritual closet, and disclose what you were revealed to by Albert. And I lost some people, won many more people, and it was a great experience, a great transformation in my life, Janet.
Well, and I think that in itself is a great story and a great encouragement to people who I know out there are having experiences. I mean, I've had my own, and without somebody who's done it, it's a scary proposition when you come from a conservative background, which you did, to take a position like this. But again, I think your timing, Albert's timing, was impeccable, that you're bringing this information right now, right when it's relevant. Even 10 years ago, the energy was different. No one would have been able to really do this without great adversity. And I find in general that it's speeding up. You'll hear, I'm sure, people say, the sense of time is speeding up, and it literally is. They've scientifically proven just the way we receive our downloads from the Earth through the Schumann waves. The Schumann waves increased almost double in its normal frequency. So the construct that we live in is got mechanisms to it, and they're changing. And so here are these visitors who observe us that we're unaware of, and they're here trying to help us. And you ask some great questions in the book as you dive into these first few adventures with Albert. You begin to talk to him about, why is it that we have all this great knowledge on the soul side, but we're supposed to come here to this really dark and limited reality to learn? And talk a little bit about those first few lessons and how did he show you? Dream time. Give listeners an example, a story, if you will. That's how it began.
Well, it was basically a telepathic dialogue for the first book, Dancing on the Stamp, and then my second book, he actually took me, as you mentioned, on some astral trips to the spirit side and other places where I could see what he wanted me to see, and I could write about it. But his first revelations were in my dialogue, and he basically answered all the big questions of life I've had, like who are we? Well, he said we're all eternal souls. We're created by the Source. We're connected to the Source and to everything else in the universe. And so, and then the obvious question that I said to him was, well, if I came from the spirit side or heaven, a beautiful place, wonderful paradise, why would I choose to come to this planet to incarnate as a human, which, and Earth can be a very trying place, as we all know, with a lot of difficulties, a lot of harsh conditions, a lot of strife and conflict. And he said, well, you came here because you chose to, because you wanted to experience things that were necessary for your evolution as a soul. And so that's why you're here. You came here on your own volition. The source or nobody else told you to come here, and it was your choice, and you chose the circumstances of your life. So you prepared a life plan, and you set out the major factors in your proposed life, like your name and the place you're going to be born, the identity of your parents and your siblings and relatives and spouses and so on. And you did that very specifically so that you could encounter what you needed for your evolution. So that's why you're here. That's who put you here. You put yourself here. And the other amazing revelation he said to me, which is quite different from what I learned as a child growing up at a Roman Catholic, that, the source or God doesn't manipulate events on earth, doesn't make rules for us to follow. And furthermore, when you pass on, when your physical body dies, you go back to the spirit side, regardless of what you did on this planet, because there is no judgment after your death, and there is no hell. So very astounding, different revelations, and quite different from what I learned as a child. But when Albert told me all this, it really rang true. It made sense to me. And then after I started my astral trips with him, then it was really confirmed to me that this is really how the universe and the cycle of reincarnation on Earth work. So it was an amazing experience.
Talk about a little bit the reincarnation and karma. Let's hear Albert's and your experiences for listeners, because again, that's a big one I hear, and I have my own take on it. Yours, the comments you read in the book are similar to my own. My awareness, like you, I grew up in a very limited believing religion, and I like Albert's concept that, for instance, reincarnation, that they don't really want you to believe in it, or you might not pick up and go to church on Sunday. If you think you've got one life to live, you're more paying attention to it versus if you have multiple lives. We know in the Bible that, like John the Baptist, they talked about reincarnation. It was a concept that wasn't foreign to the ancients, but somewhere along the way, it got filtered out, and more than likely, am I right, that it filtered out simply because it served a purpose to keep people in line, more than it had any real truth. Is that more or less?
No, that's exactly right. And Albert says, reincarnation is a very real phenomenon. We all go through it. And he said that some of the early leaders of the church decided that the best way to hold our feet to the fire was to tell us we only had one go-around, one chance, one life. And we better be good and follow the rules, because at the end of that, if we didn't, we'll be sent to an awful place called hell. Whereas if we had multiple chances, we can keep on coming back and to another life until we got it right. There'd be less incentive for us to be, good in any given life. And so that's why he said they just wrote off reincarnation and said, no, you only get one shot at it. But like you say, there were some early people in the church who actually did talk about reincarnation, and that, as you say, that got filtered out very deliberately. But the reality is, reincarnation is something that we've all experienced. We've all had many different lives, probably on this planet, maybe in other planets, and it's just a fact of life. It's how souls evolve by incarnating in the physical plane into different life forms, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and so ultimately, his explaining of reincarnation was it's just an educational tool, correct? Until a person achieves a certain level, and then they can opt out of the time game?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a learning tool. Yeah, it's a learning tool. It's here for us to meet challenges, to learn lessons, and to experience things we need for evolution. And then after every life, we'll have a life review where we go over in detail what we just experienced, and then from there, we'll figure out, okay, this is where I made a mistake, this is where I went off track, and that helps you to sort of plan your next incarnation so you can sort of learn the things you didn't learn in the last life. And so it's all very much of a learning experience. And when we get to a certain point, Albert says, and we decide this for ourselves, we can decide, okay, I've graduated from this Earth school, and I'm going to go on to another planet, or I'm just going to, hang out on the spirit side. Entirely up to us. We decide when we've had enough, and anytime we've had, we just can't have another life on this planet, we can just say, that's it, I'm done. I'm going somewhere else. So it's always our choice, and we're not sort of ever bound to this planet by the wheel of karma, because he said karma is not a law that binds us to do things or it makes us keep on coming back again and again, because we always have the choice as to when we want to terminate our lives on Earth. And he says karma is like a system of measuring the good things versus the bad things we do in our lives. And he said that, at the end of any life, if we still have a negative karmic balance, he said most souls will feel the moral obligation to return and try to wipe the slate clean, but we're not forced to do so. It's entirely our choice. So his view of karma is much different from what a lot of people say it is, and I actually like his view much better. It just makes more sense to me.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And again, we now know that if you study the ancients, a lot of the, we'll call it technology, for lack of a better word, that it was a normal part of life. People recognized it. Somewhere, again, it got cut off. And these limitations where I looked at it, I call it the dumbing down of the human race. A lot of people believe that we're evolving. I personally do not believe that. I believe we're de-evolving. That is why we need an awakening. I mean, it makes sense to me that if we were really evolving, we wouldn't need to be woke up, would we? We would just be on our next level of evolution. Instead, they're having to make these huge interventions, like Albert coming to you and changing your life dramatically. Not that it was a bad thing, but they're having to make these great interventions because we are off course. We are not where we are supposed to be. And even though there's positive out of all of that, you can still make two negatives can eventually create a positive. We are still not the race that we were intended or meant to be. And I know you go a little bit more into that in book 2, even talking about they took you to some other planets, correct? And showed you other. Talk about that a little bit. And let me back up, though, to finish that thought. Did he speak to you about that humans' evolution somewhere got thwarted?
Yeah, it was not just Albert, but I actually had a meeting with the Council of Wise Ones in the Spirit Side on my first astral trip, and that's a body of very wise souls that oversee all the incarnations on Earth. And they gave me a message. They were basically exactly what you said, Janet, that we're not making enough progress as a civilization. We let our negative emotions rule too much of our lives, which results in strife and conflicts and murders and mass shootings and so on. And because we now have weapons of mass destruction that we can literally destroy all life on our planet, they said we're at a crucial point, and we need to change course. We need to start moving down the path towards spiritual enlightenment before we destroy ourselves. And so their message to me was, do your best to spread their message to all of humanity. They said that, as you mentioned before, their message is coming through many different channels. People like yourself who host radio shows, and people who write books and blogs, and people who speak at conferences, and they're blasting this message out through many different channels because they think we're at a crucial point, and they need to get it out to us that we really need to embrace love and compassion and discard our negative emotions. And if we don't do that, we could end up in disaster. And if we can get our act together and reject the dark side of humanity, then we can continue on with our path of evolution that was always intended for us. And so, yeah, we're at a very crucial point, and that's why, as you said, in the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's been more and more people aware, spiritually aware of what's happening and where we need to go, which wasn't the case, 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. So we're at a very great inflection point in our development, and all the people who are spreading the word, as I said, like yourself and people who write books, it's really up to us to try to convey that message to everyone around us so that we can sort of, pull the fat out of the fire and save our bacon before it's too late.
Yeah, and again, I think that's extraordinary and accurate. I just want to provoke people to think about it because I hear this a lot. Oh, we're moving towards, especially in just the surface, we'll call it the shallow level of thinking that our culture operates off of, that especially with the technology, that, they look at the future as being, well, the technology will actually be embedded in our bodies and it'll help us evolve. That isn't what this is about. We don't need technology to evolve. We can evolve without it if we will dig into our roots, which is what you're really talking about. And the point has been missed, that humans in their original form did not need all this nonsense, which is really where you went and visited some of these other worlds. Is that not what they said, that they're highly technical, but not in the way that we think of technology? Is that right?
Well, yeah, one of the interesting planets that I visited was a planet called Proteus, which is a water planet. And there, underneath the waters, I met with a dolphin and a humpback whale. And the sea life underneath the water looked very much like the undersea world of Earth. And these people told me, we communicated by telepathy, they said that much of the sea life that we have on Earth was originally seeded from their planet a long time ago by extraterrestrials who transported it to our planet. And this dolphin and whale said that they communicate by telepathy with the dolphins and whales on our planet, and they're very distressed about what they hear because of all the abuse that humans have heaped on dolphins and whales and other creatures on our planet over the centuries, with the hunting and trapping and imprisoning in water parks and all the other conflict that we visit on them, through the centuries. Not as much today as in the past, but we still do more than we really should. And they said, the dolphins and whales on Earth are very intelligent, sensitive creatures, and in some ways they're more intelligent than humans because they communicate by telepathy. But they don't have any technology. They don't need technology to experience a oneness with nature and with the universe, which is what they do. And they're very upset about the fact that humans, with their technology, have become, violent and abusive and aggressive, and are really something that stands in the way of their ability to live in harmony with Mother Earth and all her creatures. So that was very interesting. Is that you don't need technology to be considered to be a very intelligent creature, and that was one example.
That's a really good one. And I think it's important, again, to really grasp that, because ultimately, if we're going to not only just realize that this is maybe level one where we're waking up, and I do believe we're at a pinnacle, even the Mayan calendar talking about all the different, and people have misunderstood that, but, the 2012 wasn't the end of the world. It was the end of an era. And moving forward, it's a time clock. It's a timepiece. That might be the better way to put it. And the way we live in this projected reality is all based upon, our perceptions. As long as we believe we're small, we will stay small. And I think this awakening, as your book so clearly brings out with the way Albert is, encouraging you. I mean, he's tearing apart all, we're going to call it religious dogma, a lot of the narrowing beliefs that keep us so refined to a very small belief system. The abilities that we have that are dormant, that we obviously they're innate in us, those will start to stimulate. Has that happened to you and for you as this process? I can only imagine from where you woke up that day with Albert to where you are now. Talk about that awakening process, moving into, and what we're really talking is enlightenment. Is there another word for it that Albert used?
No, I think that describes it pretty well, Janet. It was an amazing process for me because before I met Albert, I was very much of a straight-laced, button-down corporate lawyer who didn't really, wasn't tapped into spirituality and who had rejected religion, and so I was sort of in no man's land. So when Albert came along, all of a sudden my spiritual eyes were opened, wide up, and I learned so much from him, not just from what he told me in our dialogue, but from my astral trips to the spirit side, to meet other souls, to meet other creatures, intelligent creatures on other planets, and to just better understand what happens on our planet and how in the direction we should be heading in terms of increasing our or helping our spiritual evolution. I mean, he says that what we really need to do, the goal for humans is to increase our vibrations and expand our consciousness, and eventually the goal is to ascend up to our planet in a higher dimension called the New Earth. And I actually he took me on one of my trips. He took me to visit the New Earth, which was really quite an amazing experience because there, I met with a civilization, the ancestors whose ancestors had ascended from our Earth a long time ago from Central America. They did a mass ascension of the people in their village to escape from an encroaching army that was about to cause them a lot of problems, and they did a mass ascension, and so their descendants are in the New Earth, which is an amazing place where there's no crime or conflict, no negative emotions, no one has to work, everyone can just pursue knowledge and try to increase their wisdom. It was a very idyllic place And that's a place that we can all get to as long as we raise our vibrations. But in order to do that, we have to discard our negative emotions and embrace love. So, and a number of humans have already made that ascension. Some of them do it in groups, some do it one by one. But we can all eventually get there. But we have a lot of obstacles ahead of us. And so his goal is to try to help humans understand where they should be heading and how they should get there. So it was a very enlightening experience for me, and I hope that the people who read my books will have a similar journey that I did.
I don't think they could help it. I mean, as they read your book or any book that's that intention, it's going to shift their consciousness, and I believe tap into that subconsciousness that is really screaming to get out and be set free. Tell listeners a little bit, what does it mean? I know what it means, but what does it mean, or Albert's version, or whatever way you want to explain it, when you talk about raising frequency? You're doing that when you read a book and you change your mind about something. That's raising frequency. What other ways can a person raise their frequency? Because by doing so, the frequency of love is automatically heightened. So are there other ways that happens? It's something you can explain based on your experience or something Albert shared.
Yeah, the main thing is to just, literally, when you fully embrace love, there's no room for the negative emotions. There's no room for anger, hate, fear, or judgment of other people. Now, that sounds easy in concept, hard to do, when you're living as a human on this planet. But fully embracing love is the way to raise your vibrations, and that means you won't judge people. You'll be kind to other people. You won't lash out in anger when somebody steps on your toes, and you'll be kind not only to humans but to all the other animals on our planet, and to good old Mother Earth herself in terms of curtailing our pollution. So those are the goals we all have to strive towards. The other way of helping your evolution and raising our vibrations is by listening to your spirit guides, by learning to meditate, sit quietly, and try to get rid of all the clutter in our minds, so that we can hear the messages from our guides. And they are always trying to send us positive messages of love to steer us in the right direction. And to the extent that we can hear more of those messages and sign on to them, then we're going to be on the path of raising our vibrations and expanding our consciousness. So it's not an easy thing to do. It's easy to say, but not necessarily to put into practice. But that's really how we do it, and we do it bit by bit. It doesn't happen all at once. It really is.
That's a good word. It really is a practice, isn't it? It's a daily intention, something that you choose. Just as you chose, you could have walked away from Albert that day, but you raised your vibration just simply by choosing not to judge by the look, but by watching the man's eyes and feeling with that deep intuition that you were in the presence of something unusual. That alone raises vibration, does it not?
Yeah, absolutely, and we can all do it in slightly different ways. I mean, the next time that you pass by a homeless man and drop some money in his hat, you're raising your vibrations. And if you're driving down the freeway and somebody cuts you off, and your temptation is to give him funny gestures, and you say, no, I'm not going to do that because he's a soul who's just trying to live through his journey on Earth, that raises your vibrations. So every time you curtail your negative reactions, or increase your acts of kindness to other people around you, and every time that you read a book or listen to a radio show where people are telling you about spirituality and how to go down the path of spiritual evolution, every one of those things helps you raise your vibrations, and each incremental increase gets you on the path and helps you get to where you want to go, and eventually, right. I don't know whether I'll ever do it in my lifetime, but I know that my vibrations have certainly increased considerably since when I was practicing law.
Yeah, well, enlightenment is a process that's beyond it, but awakening is the first stage, and there are stages even to that. And again, all great comments and great ways to do it, from, again, practicing it every day, reading books, acts of kindness. There's just every possible way that somebody can make a difference and change their life. This is one of my favorite subjects, and you talk about it towards the back of the book, the illusion of time. And I don't want to go into it too deep because I know it's a bigger topic, and I have lots of information on it myself. But let's talk about that a little bit, because we talked a little bit about how karma works, And I think it's important, again, this is much more of a science thing, but I think the way that Albert explained it was really great. So talk a little bit about that, the illusion of time.
Well, the illusion of time is the illusion we have on Earth that there's a past, a present, and a future. And we all live with it because we remember things that happened in the past. That's, something that happened 2 weeks ago is the past. Something that's going to happen a month from now is the future. And then the present is sort of a very fleeting moment that barely lasts. Albert says that's just an illusion here. The reality is, on the spirit side, there is no past or future, just one big now. Everything happens in the now. And that's really hard for humans to wrap their minds around because, the linear time that we're used to is so prevalent in our lives. I mean, it happens to all of us. And Albert says, one of the things we can do is to have our happier journeys on this planet and to raise our vibrations is to stop worrying about what happened in the past and stop contemplating what may happen in the future and live in the present moment. And that's what meditation can help you do, is to live in the present moment, which helps you raise your vibrations, gets rid of stress in your life, and just makes for a much happier journey. So I still can't fully comprehend that there's no past or future on the spirit side, that there's only a present. But he said, don't worry about it, because he said you're trying to understand this with the limitations of your puny human mind. And that once you get back to the spirit side, you will fully comprehend what I'm saying. But in the meantime, know for certain that there is no linear time on the spirit side. And so that's why when you're a soul on the spirit side and you're contemplating incarnating on Earth into a human, they look at a lifetime of 80 years on Earth, which to us seems like a long time. On the spirit side, it's just like the blink of an eye. So it's really not a long time for each life when you're there, even though it seems like a long time when we're here.
Well, and I think, too, he talks about thought creation in your book. You mention it. And I think I always like to tell clients about that it really is like a program on a software program, that we enter this reality and we're kind of entering a software program. It's very elaborate. It's a virtual program. And, yes, you're right. It has parameters and structure. But I personally believe just as we were sort of dumbed down over time, time became much less fluid and flexible. If you, again, read even in the Bible that originally people lived for thousands of years. It was normal to live long periods of time, even at the time we'll call it Adam's time and moving into Moses. But that changed. Somewhere it changed, and again, de-evolving down into this lower, where 80 years seems like a long time. Back then, 1,000 was really norm for many, many people back at that point. So somewhere, the ability to thought create was more normal. The idea of time being a program now being more relevant, that we can only see ourselves in this state. Most people project into the future. That's why they can't stay in the present moment. And if you're going to stay in the present moment, that's what meditation, as you rightly said, is so great for. It really dissolves time. That's what meditation does. It takes you out of time and puts you into the present moment. And if you can do that enough, you can really dissolve the boundaries. And this is where your thought creation, I thought, was fascinating. And he talks about it, if you'd like to share that. Even an apple, driving to the store, you decide you want an apple. He uses that analogy. You want to share that with listeners real quickly.
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, thoughts are very creative, and thoughts are waves of energy that fan out and affect other energy and mass in the universe. So thoughts are very powerful. But on Earth, our thoughts are not nearly as powerful as they are on the spirit side. On the spirit side, if you desire an apple, you can just visualize that you have an apple in your hand, and there it is. On Earth, things move much more slowly. Our thoughts aren't nearly as powerful. And so here, if I'm sitting here and I say, I'd like to have an apple, then I have to do a number of steps. I have to, get up and find my car keys, get in the car, drive to the supermarket, find an apple in one of the aisles, pay for it, get back in my car, come back to my house. And then after all those steps, I now have an apple in my hand, which is a much slower process than what happens on the spirit side. And that was designed very deliberately because Earth, in a lot of ways, is like living in slow motion compared to the spirit side. And it's designed to allow us to understand the implications of our actions much easier because they're happening much slower, and so it's very much of a learning tool. But people on Earth, there have been people on Earth who've learned to focus their thoughts into powerful beams of energy and do things that we would call miraculous. Souls like Jesus and Moses and some of the people who perform miracles ascribed to them in the Bible. They learned how to focus their thoughts into powerful beams of energy and do things that, walk on water, turn water into wine, part the Red Sea, and so on. They could do that because they were masters who had learned to utilize more of their brains to accomplish these things. And it's open to all of us to be able to do that, but we just have to be focused in what we do. Meditation can certainly help us focus our thoughts. Not to say that we can all go out and perform miracles tomorrow, but we can certainly strive to sort of get there. And, at some point, if we can learn to use more than 10% of our brains, all of us can do all those things that Jesus and Moses did as described in the Bible. So, thoughts are very, very, very powerful things. They're just much slower, much less effective on the earth plane, and that's just something that we have to live with. That's part of the challenge of being a human on our planet.
Yeah, exactly. So here we have to get in our car, drive to the supermarket, get the apple, bring it home, wash it, either eat it or cut it. In the spirit side, you would just simply manifest the apple, and that would be that. If there's all those steps in between are not there. That's an easy way to put it. And I just think, again, that's really cool. I think that, again, the first step is this awakening that these things that appear as miracles are normal. If we can remember that this all was a big learning education center. And for whatever reason, we're being asked to wake up that we have these abilities, they're there, or at minimum to understand how it all works so that we can move forward to perhaps a more elevated consciousness, and who knows what is possible. We have about 13 minutes. I want you to give one more time how listeners can reach you. They can go to your website, tell them how to do that. And we'll come back and tie it up with a few more things I want to ask you.
Okay. Well, the best way to contact me and get information about my books is on my website, which is GarnetSchulhauser.com. And as I mentioned, that's not easy to remember, so if you Google Dancing on a Stamp, you'll get there. And there's information about me and my books on my website. There's buy links to all the popular online stores where you can click on them. You can immediately get to a place where you can download or buy the paperback versions. You can access all my social media sites where I do regular postings so you can find out what's going on in my life and what's happening with my books. And my email address is there as well, Janet, so if anybody wants to send me a question or a comment, I'd be happy to hear from them.
Wonderful. That's a great thing. And, of course, you've got lots of radio shows and places that you are speaking so people can come and learn more and hear more. And the books, by the way, for listeners, they're easy to read. These are well put together, especially if this is new territory for anybody. This is not like, a long dissertation. They're short chapters. They're quick-paced. They're very easy to grasp. And you have it set up so that Albert's words are in the bolded. I mean, it's very easy to follow. So know that for listeners. I had wanted to ask you this, and you kind of segued into it nicely. Tell me where the title Dancing on a Stamp, what does that mean exactly?
Well, it happened when I was in one of my dialogues with Albert, and I happened to be complaining about something that wasn't going right in my life. And Albert says, let me tell you what your problem is. He said, imagine that life on Earth is like you being in a big, beautiful ballroom, and there's a band playing wonderful dance music, and all the people around you are swirling and dancing around the whole dance floor and enjoying the rhythm of the music. And he said that I had spent too much time on one spot, like I was wearing leg shackles, and that I needed to break out of my comfort zone and quit dancing on a stamp. And so that phrase stuck in my mind, Janet, and when I was searching about for a title for my first manuscript, I asked Albert if that would be a good title, and he said, yes, it would be. And hence my first book is called Dancing on a Stamp.
Yeah, and it says, as he said, quit dancing on a stamp, let yourself swirl around the whole ballroom. Feel the rhythm of the music as it resonates through your body. That's frequency, raising your frequency. Let your feet slide, your arms pump, and your body sway to the music. You came here to experience this ballroom, Earth, other human beings, so get to know it. Dance like no one is watching. Let your heart sing with the joy of being alive. When the music stops, you will leave this ballroom to find your next adventure. It's great. It's great. It's a brilliant title. And I just wanted listeners to hear it because I think it's really, it was a great way to end the book and a great title. And it is a great metaphor to how we can live our lives without even realizing it, that we have been living on this tiny little stamp our whole lives, and didn't know it, when there's this giant world and universe that we were meant to explore, and in all kinds of ways, and without recognizing it. And here you had already begun the awakening process, and yet whatever the problem was, you were still dancing on the stamp. I just think I think it's brilliant. I think it's great. I think it's relevant to us all. Yeah, well, I think we all do it. I know I do. I think I'm so aware, and then I'll catch myself in a rut, and I don't even recognize it until it's pointed out to me. And, again, this is what being here, that's really about, isn't it? It's about waking up that you're dancing on a stamp.
Yeah, exactly, and you said that very well, Janet. Thank you. I should quote you in my next book.
Well, it's a great book. And quickly, let's talk. We've got about 9 minutes, so let's talk quickly about Dancing Forever with Spirit. And your subtitle is Astonishing Insights from Heaven, and it's quite a statement. And this book's a little different. This one does go more, I'll say, in depth. So we don't have time to cover the whole thing, but talk about where this book evolved out of. You know, after you got off the stamp and you began to dance on the whole universe, where did you and Albert go?
Well, the first trip was to the spirit side, and that was an amazing experience because the first great thing that happened to me there was that I met with what he called what would be my welcoming party when I finally crossed over myself. And so there it was a group of souls that were my mother and my father and my brother and various aunts and uncles who had passed away previously. And so I went up to them, and that proved without a doubt in my mind about the fact that people do live past their deaths on earth, that there is an afterlife, and their souls go to the spirit side. And so, because there they were all standing there and greeting me and giving me warm hugs. And not only my human relatives, but my little dog, Oscar, who had passed away 10 years before, he came running from behind the crowd with his little tail wagging his whole body, running towards me to give me a face licking. It was so wonderful to be reunited with all these people. The only little apprehension I had initially about meeting my mother, who I love dearly, was that she was very religious during her life on earth, and I was concerned that she might not have liked what I wrote about in Dancing on a Stamp because I was not kind to the Catholic Church. But she just said, not to worry, it's great, because once I'm back on the spirit side, I see the whole picture, and I agree with everything that you wrote in your book. So that was a relief, and I then understood that no matter what you believe when you're on earth, you would see the full picture once you crossed over, and there would be no problem if you don't believe what Albert says. If you still believe in what your religion tells you, it doesn't matter, because you still end up in the same place, and then you'll get the full revelation once you're on the spirit side. So that was a very exciting adventure. As I said, I met with a council of wise ones, which was really quite enlightening in terms of their message for humanity. And I got to view the Akashic records, which, as you know, Janet, are the records of every life that's ever been lived in the universe. And there I got to, Albert showed me a few segments from my current life and also a few segments from some of my previous lives, which were very eye-opening for me, but I think there was a lesson there for all humans, so it was quite an amazing adventure, and I was happy to write about them, and I hope that people enjoy what I've written and take home a message from what Albert has shown me.
And I think you will. And I think it's too important to mention that when you first started to connect with Albert again, the second time, or as this second book was going to unfold, you had some difficulty doing that. And he was really waiting for you. I mean, you were anxious, but you could not make it happen. You did all kinds of funny little things to try to stimulate, to get back into a conversation with Albert, and none of it worked. You had to wait for Albert. And Albert, at that point, told you he'd been watching you, and you were getting ready to go on another big adventure, almost like he was getting you ready without you knowing it. Correct? And your conscious mind was kind of fighting against that, but your subconscious mind must have been in some kind of, he must have been doing things with you that you maybe weren't consciously aware of to get you ready to take these travels that you were taking.
Yeah, I think that's right. And clearly he had a timetable for me, an agenda, and he knew what he's doing, and he knew when the time was right. And so when, in his view, the time was right, then he showed up. And how it happened was he just showed up in my bedroom one night. It was sort of like an ethereal figure that was standing in my bedroom door.
Right.
And as he moved closer, I saw that it was Albert. And he said, look, at next set of adventures with me, I'm going to take you on some astral trips so that you can write about what you see and what you hear, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. So rather than just have him tell me what he wanted me to know, he wanted me to actually see it and experience it, because then it would be clearer in my mind and easier for me to write about it. And I think to that extent he's very true, because my memories of those trips were very vivid. When I'd wake up the next morning, I'd be refreshed and the memories would be very clear, and I'd go to my computer and I'd quickly write out my notes about what I saw. So I think that was an amazing way for him to get his message to me and for me to get it to other people.
Yeah, and I think that's important for anybody who's going through this, that I don't care what form of spiritual endeavor it is, whether you're writing a book or as you wrote the books, the books were to reveal what you were experiencing, but to experience it, you had to be primed up for it without really understanding the process. Here's where living in the moment really comes in, because you couldn't make it happen. You had to wait for them to reveal it through you. And I think that's as powerful a message as any others that you've written about, because we do get frustrated. We want things on our timetable. We want to keep going. And you couldn't make it happen. You had to wait. You had to wait for those revelations. And boy, were they revelations. You went on some big rides, big adventures, as he put it. Truly amazing. And that's what the second book for listeners. He goes into the planet Proteus, and besides visiting his relatives, the spirit world, he delves into it much deeper. So I'm assuming book 3 is about another level of learning to dance. Maybe that's where you become a professional, a real pro at dancing through the universe. We have about 3 minutes. Go ahead and just give me a wrap-up, a takeaway for listeners from your many adventures and more to come, and then we'll close the show.
Well, the words of wisdom that Albert left me with many times were basically, he said, you need to lighten up and not take life so seriously. Mm-hmm. He said, you're on an amazing adventure. You're having a journey on Earth that you plan for yourself. You're here to learn things, and you should not worry, because no matter how many wrong turns you make or how many mistakes you make, you'll never become lost or go wrong. You'll always end up on the spirit side. So he said, spend more time laughing and smiling at people, and enjoy yourself, because it's not as serious as you think, and you're always going to end up back in a beautiful place no matter what you do. So I thought that was really good words of wisdom coming from Albert.
Yeah, that is a great words of wisdom, a great takeaway for listeners. We hope that you will get Garnet's books, Dancing on a Stamp, Dancing Forever with Spirit, and go to his website. He will post when the new book from Ozark Publishing is coming out, and be sure you check out some of his other shows, because every show is different. There's a different emphasis, and he's full of great information and stories to help you launch your own awakening journey. Thank you for following your heart and doing the brave thing all those years ago, Garnet. That was, you've given a gift to the world, so appreciate you being on the show and for what you do in the world. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that, Janet, and thank you for having me on your show. I enjoyed every minute.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Listeners, stay tuned. We have more great guests coming up. We have Dr. L.J. Rose coming next week. She is an author, natural fusion chef, and she will be talking about her mind-body connection to cooking and eating. It's very exciting. So that's next week, and be sure you check out all the great shows. Everyone, have a great rest of your day, and always be well. Bye-bye.